The night was silent, but I woke up to the sound of someone humming my brother's favorite song. My heart stopped. He died last year. As I followed the sound down the hallway, I saw his bedroom door slightly open, and a shadow moved inside. I should have turned back. I should have never opened that door. But I did, and everything changed. What happened next still haunts me. Stay with me if you dare. This is where it all began. I was never the same after I lost my brother Daniel. He was not just my sibling. He was my best friend, my protector, and the only person who truly understood me. Growing up, we did everything together. We would ride our bikes around the neighborhood until the streetlights came on, sneak into the kitchen at midnight for snacks, and stay up talking about ghosts, monsters, and what came after death. He was 2 years older than me, smarter, braver, and always first to speak his mind. I, on the other hand, was quiet, careful, and often depended on him to feel safe. Daniel was the kind of person who left an impact wherever he went. He had this bright energy, always smiling, always joking. People liked being around him. Our parents adored him, teachers praised him, and even strangers felt drawn to him. But underneath all that charm, he was also deeply curious, especially about things most people avoided. He loved horror stories, urban legends, haunted places. I remember him spending hours reading about rituals and cursed objects. It used to scare me the way he talked about these things like they were real. "What if we tried one someday?" he would say with a smirk, and I would just shake my head, pretending to laugh. The year he died, everything fell apart. It was not sudden, but it felt like it. Daniel had been acting strange for weeks before the accident. He would stare at nothing for long stretches of time, mutter things under his breath, and sometimes wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Our parents thought it was stress, school maybe, or just a phase. But I knew something was wrong. I could feel it in the way he looked at me, like he wanted to tell me something but could not find the words. Then, one rainy afternoon, he went missing. The police found his body 2 days later in a wooded area miles away from our house. They said it looked like he had fallen and hit his head, but the details never made sense. There were bruises on his arms, marks on his neck, and something strange carved into the tree above where he was found. The authorities ruled it an accident, but I never believed that. Not then, not now. After the funeral, I stopped talking to most people. School became a blur. Friends faded. My parents tried to act normal, but our house was filled with silence. Daniel's room stayed locked, untouched, like a shrine. I could not bring myself to go inside, not even once. Every time I walked past it, I felt a chill, like something inside was still waiting, watching. We lived in an old house on the edge of town, surrounded by trees that blocked out the sun during winter. The kind of house that creaked at night and echoed every footstep. It never felt haunted, before Daniel died. But after, it changed. Lights flickered without reason. Doors opened by themselves. Sometimes I would hear footsteps upstairs when I was alone. I told myself it was grief, my mind playing tricks on me, but deep down, I knew it was more than that. There was one night, about a month after his funeral, when I heard tapping on my bedroom window. 3 soft knocks. I was on the second floor. No branches nearby, nothing that could have caused it. I was too afraid to check. The next morning, I saw muddy fingerprints on the glass, from the outside. My parents were falling, apart in their own way. My mother stopped cooking. My father worked longer hours. They barely spoke to each other. The house, once full of laughter and music, had become a place of mourning. I often found myself alone, staring at old photos of Daniel, trying to remember the sound of his voice. I was terrified I would forget it someday. One evening, I found an old notebook in the attic with Daniel's handwriting. Inside were pages filled with symbols, drawings, and notes about rituals he had read online. One page was dog-eared, with a heading that read, "The Veil Between Worlds." Beneath it was a warning: do not attempt alone. Do not call what you do not understand. I should have burned that notebook. I should have walked away. but something inside me wanted to know the truth. Why had Daniel changed before his death? What had he discovered? Was it really an accident? Or had he brought something back with him? I did not know it then, but reading that notebook was the beginning of everything. The beginning of my descent into something far darker than I ever imagined. And the beginning of the night. My brother came back. The days that followed were quiet, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of quiet that presses down on your chest, makes your ears ring, and fills the air with invisible weight. My parents continued drifting like ghosts in the same house we had all once shared. I kept to myself, mostly in my room, headphones on, pretending to focus on schoolwork I was not really doing. But even in silence, I began to notice things. Little things. Things that did not make sense. The first time it happened, I was brushing my teeth late at night. I heard music playing faintly behind me. It was not coming from my phone or the hallway. It was coming from Daniel's room, a low, familiar tune, one he used to hum all the time. I froze, staring into the mirror. My hands trembled. The door to his room had been locked since the funeral. I ran to my parents' room, but they were asleep, or at least pretending to be. When I checked again, the music had stopped. The next morning, I convinced myself it was my imagination, but it happened again 2 nights later. This time, I heard the sound of drawers opening, wood scraping against wood. I walked slowly to his door and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. Just silence. But I felt it. The presence. The heavy, breathless pressure that comes when someone stands too close without speaking. The days passed in a blur. At school, I could barely focus. Teachers talked, classmates laughed, but I was stuck in a different world, one where Daniel was both gone and somehow still here. At home, things escalated. I found his old baseball cap on the kitchen counter, even though I had seen our mother pack all his belongings in a sealed box in the attic. I returned it, thinking maybe someone had gone through his things. But the next night, the same cap was lying on the stairs. One evening, as I walked past the hallway, I heard my name whispered. It was so soft I thought I imagined it. But when I turned, there was no one there. No windows open, no wind, just darkness. I started waking up at exactly 3:12 a.m. every night, heart pounding, drenched in sweat. The room would be cold, colder than it should have been. At first, I blamed it on stress, grief, sleep paralysis. But then, the dreams began. In the first dream, I saw Daniel standing at the foot of my bed. He looked exactly the way he did before. He died, only stiller. His eyes were open but unblinking. His mouth moved slowly, trying to speak, but no sound came out. I tried to reach him, but my body would not move. Then he smiled, wide, too wide, and vanished in a flash of darkness. I woke up gasping. In the second dream, I was in the forest, the same place where they had found his body. The trees whispered, and the ground felt wet. I looked down and saw Daniel's notebook in my hands. I turned a page, and it bled. A deep red stain spread across the paper, and I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, but woke up before I could see who it was. The dreams became more frequent, more vivid. Sometimes I would wake up with scratches on my arm, or the feeling of fingers brushing against my neck. I tried to tell myself it was just sleep disturbances, but my fear was growing. One Saturday afternoon, I finally gathered the courage to unlock Daniel's room. The air inside was stale, frozen in time. His posters still hung on the wall, his bed neatly made, and the faint smell of his cologne lingered in the sheets. But as I stepped inside, I felt like I was trespassing, like someone, or something was, watching me. I walked over to his desk. On top was a picture of the two of us smiling. My hand reached for the drawer below, the one he always kept locked. To my surprise, it slid open easily. Inside was a collection of strange things. Burnt matches, pages from books written in Latin, and a cassette tape labeled, "For After." I did not have a cassette player, so I took the tape to a thrift store in town. The old man behind the counter handed me a dusty player for cheap. That night, with trembling hands, I hit play. At first there was static, then Daniel's voice, calm, focused. "If you are hearing this, it means something has gone wrong," he said. I tried to stop it. I tried to control it, but I was wrong. It was never just a ritual. It was a doorway. I think I let something in. And now I cannot make it leave. My blood ran cold. I wanted to talk to Mom, to you, but I was afraid. It watches through reflections. Do not look into the mirror when you are alone. Do not answer if I call you. After midnight. It is not me. The tape ended abruptly. My hand was shaking. I rewound it and listened again, hoping I had misunderstood. But the message was clear. Daniel had done something. Something dark. Something dangerous. And whatever it was, it might still be here. I started noticing mirrors more after that. Noticing how the reflection sometimes felt delayed or off. One night, while brushing my teeth, I caught movement behind me in the mirror. But when I turned, there was nothing there. When I looked back at the mirror, my reflection was still staring the other way. I smashed it that same night. The quiet before the storm is not really quiet. It is filled with whispers, cold air, and shadows that stretch too long. I knew something was building. Something was waiting. I could feel it. The house was no longer just haunted by memories. It was becoming a gateway. A place where time, reality, and death itself were starting to unravel. And the worst part? I started hearing Daniel's voice again. Not in dreams, not in recordings, in the hallway, behind the walls, calling my name. It began slowly at first, but the signs became harder to ignore. The line between dream and reality blurred so much that I could no longer tell when I was awake. I started seeing things during the day, shadows darting across the hallway, reflections that did not belong to me, whispers that came from inside the walls. I told myself I was losing my mind, that grief was pushing me too far. But deep down, I knew. Something had changed. Something had awakened. It was a Thursday night when the real terror began. I had fallen asleep with the old notebook in my lap, Daniel's warning still echoing in my ears. I woke up suddenly, cold sweat on my forehead, and my room was pitch black, even though I always left my lamp on. The bulb had burned out. As I reached for my phone, I heard something from the hallway. Slow, dragging footsteps. I held my breath, sitting completely still. The steps stopped right outside my door. Then, a knock. Just once. Not loud, but enough to freeze my blood. I did not move. Did not speak. After a few moments, the door creaked open on its own. But there was no one there. That night, I did not sleep. The next morning, my mother looked pale and shaken. When I asked her what was wrong, she said she had seen Daniel in the kitchen around 2 a.m. She thought it was a dream until she found the fridge door left wide open and muddy footprints on the tile. My father brushed it off, saying it must have been one of us, but I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew what she saw. Over the next few days, things escalated quickly. I began waking up in different rooms. Once on the living room floor. Another time in Daniel's bed. I never remembered getting up. My clothes would be dirty, and my hands often had small scratches or bruises. I started recording myself while I slept. The footage terrified me. One clip showed me sitting up around 3 a.m., staring directly at the camera for over 10 minutes without blinking. Another showed me whispering something repeatedly. I enhanced the audio. I was saying, "He is not gone. He is coming back." Over and over, doors slammed shut on their own. Electronics turned on in the middle of the night. Lights flickered violently when I walked past. I tried blessing the house with sage as I had read online. It only made things worse. The moment I lit the bundle, the fire alarm went off, even though there was no smoke. The mirror in the hallway cracked from the inside. I began seeing Daniel, not just hearing him, seeing him. At first, it was brief. A glimpse in the corner of my eye. A figure standing at the top of the stairs. a face outside my window. But then one night I saw him clearly, standing at the foot of my bed. He looked just like he used to, but his eyes were wrong. Too dark, empty, and he was smiling. Not the warm, goofy smile I remembered. This smile was cold. I tried to speak, but my voice failed me. He tilted his head slowly and then vanished. I did not tell my parents. I could barely tell myself. I went back to the notebook, desperate for answers. I read through every page, every drawing, every note Daniel had scribbled in the margins. He had been trying to open a doorway, to communicate with the dead, but something went wrong. He had performed a ritual he found on a deep web forum. It required a mirror, a drop of blood, a candle, and silence. The notebook warned not to break the circle. Daniel had drawn a sketch of what he saw during the ritual. It looked like a figure, tall, thin, and faceless, with eyes that bled. One entry stood out. The first stage is dreaming, then reflection, then invitation. Once you speak to it, it never forgets you. I had spoken. I had listened. One night I found myself locked inside the bathroom. The door would not open no matter how hard I pulled. The lights flickered, and the mirror began to fog even though there was no hot water running. Slowly, words appeared on the glass. You open the door, now he walks through you. I screamed until my father broke the door down. The words were gone. But I knew what I had seen. I tried staying with a friend for a few nights. I thought maybe distance would help. But on the second night, the same things followed me. My friend's dog barked endlessly at the corner of the room. The lights went out, and around 3 a.m., my phone played the cassette audio by itself, even though I had never transferred the file. It was not the house. It was me. Something had attached itself to me through Daniel, through grief, through blood. I started seeing him, in reflections again, but they began to act on their own. I would turn away from a mirror and my reflection would stay still. Once I saw Daniel's reflection standing behind me even though no one was there. I punched the mirror. Blood poured from my hand. When I looked again, the reflection smiled. The supernatural had awakened, and it was not interested in leaving. Every room in the house had its own presence now. The attic groaned at night. Daniel's room door rattled even when locked. I heard voices in the vents calling me by name, whispering memories only Daniel and I knew. The hallway lights would die one by one as I walked through them. My mother began talking in her sleep, speaking in a voice that was not hers. I could no longer tell if Daniel was trying to return, or if something else was pretending to be him. One night I found writing carved into my bedroom wall. I had never seen it before. It said, "He gave himself to the dark. Now you will too." Underneath I found Daniel's watch, still ticking. The fear had consumed every part of my life. School, sleep, food. It all felt distant, meaningless. I was consumed by the presence, by the feeling that every shadow held a secret, every silence held a scream. And worst of all, I began to forget. Little things at first, names, dates, where I had placed something. But soon, I started forgetting parts of my day. Hours gone. No memory. Once, I found a candle burned down in the middle of a circle drawn in salt on my bedroom floor. My hands were dirty. My lips tasted like iron. The supernatural had fully awakened, and I had no idea if I was still me anymore. There is a point where fear stops feeling sharp and starts to feel dull, like a constant pressure weighing you down, crushing you slowly every minute of every day. I had reached that point. The nights no longer terrified me. They exhausted me. I stopped fighting the darkness because I knew eventually it would come anyway. But nothing could prepare me for what came next. Nothing could prepare me for his return. It started subtly, again. The entity always seemed to enjoy the slow build. I would hear Daniel's voice in the most ordinary moments, while brushing my teeth, while opening the fridge, while tying my shoes. Not screaming. Not whispering, just speaking to me. like he had never left. Like we were still two brothers, sharing the same hallway, but I wasn't talking back anymore. Then one morning, everything changed. I woke up to the smell of pancakes. For a split second, I smiled. Daniel used to make pancakes every Saturday. He always added too much syrup and burned at least one. But when I stepped into the kitchen, I froze. There he was, standing over the stove, spatula in hand, wearing the same shirt he died in, the same one we buried him in. He turned to me and smiled like it was just another weekend. "Hey," he said, "you slept in." My heart felt like it had stopped. My knees nearly buckled. I didn't move, didn't speak. I just stared. "Earth to sleepyhead?" he said again, walking toward me. "You good?" I took a step back. "You're not real," I finally whispered. His smile didn't fade. "Does it matter?" He reached out to touch my shoulder. I flinched. My body screamed at me to run, but I was frozen in place. That's when his hand went through me. Not like a ghost, not transparent. Like smoke. Like heat. Like something not bound by the rules of this world. His arm flickered, then snapped, back into place. His head twitched slightly to the side, and his voice changed. "Let me in," it said. I ran. Back to my room. Locked the door. Pushed furniture in front of it. Sat in the corner and cried until morning. When I finally built the courage to leave the room, the kitchen was empty. No pancakes, no dishes. But the smell still lingered in the air. I checked the trash. Nothing. Checked the stove. Cold. But on the counter there was Daniel's notebook, open to a page I had never seen before. The final phase. Acceptance. Once the gate is open, the soul must either reject or embrace. There is no escape. There is only through. He was not trying to scare me anymore. He was trying to become me. That night, my parents were acting strangely. My mother smiled too much. My father did not speak at all. We ate dinner in silence. At one point, I dropped my fork and leaned down to pick it up. When I looked up again, they were both staring at me, expressionless, frozen. My mother's nose started to bleed. My father blinked and blood trickled from his ears. They never mentioned it. I tried leaving the house that night, but every door led to the same hallway. I walked through the front door and ended up in the basement. I tried climbing out the window and found myself back in Daniel's room. The house was folding in on itself. And Daniel, or whatever he had become, was bending it. Around 3 a.m., he came again. This time, in my room. I didn't hear him enter. I just woke up, and he was sitting in the corner in my desk chair watching me. "You remember the lake?" he said, voice softer now. "We caught frogs and swore we'd keep them forever." I stayed silent. "I remember," he said. "I remember everything, because I'm still here. I never left. I just changed." His eyes were darker than anything I had ever seen. Not black, not empty. Like void swallowing the light. "You can stop running," he said. "All you have to do is say yes." I shook my head slowly. "You're not Daniel." He stood. "You're right," he said. "But you could be." Then he smiled again. That awful, impossible smile, and vanished in a blink. The return wasn't about haunting me anymore. It was about claiming me. Over the next few days, I started losing track of time again. Not just minutes, hours. Once, an entire day. I would come to, standing in strange places. The attic, the woods behind our house, the cemetery. Always with dirt on my hands, or strange symbols drawn on my arms in red ink. Once, I found a mirror, buried under my bed. Etched into the glass were the words, "You're almost ready." I could feel it. My thoughts weren't mine anymore. Sometimes I would start speaking and not know what I was saying until I heard my own voice. I would dream of fire, of eyes watching me from inside walls, of walking through endless mirrors, and always, Daniel was waiting, smiling, calling, welcoming. I realized then what was happening. The ritual hadn't been about summoning something. It had been about replacing something. Daniel had opened a door between life and death, and what had walked through was now trying to wear my face, speak with my mouth, think with my mind. He had returned not as a spirit, but as a virus, a parasite, and I was the host. The final straw came when I looked in the mirror and saw Daniel's reflection instead of mine. Not standing behind me, instead of me, moving when I moved, blinking when I blinked. But it was him, and then he spoke. "Almost there, little brother." I smashed the mirror again. Blood poured down my hand. But this time I didn't feel the pain. I felt peace. And that scared me more than anything. The return was almost complete. I had one choice left to make. Resist until the end, or find out what happens when you let the darkness in. Truth has a way of hiding in plain sight, waiting for the right moment to rip through the seams of your mind like a scream you've buried for too long. I had run from it, feared it, and tried to rewrite it with comforting lies. But now there was no more running. The truth was clawing its way to the surface, and it was uglier than anything I could have imagined. It started with a letter. I found it tucked inside Daniel's old camera case, sealed in an envelope with my name on it. The handwriting was shaky, rushed. The paper smelled like ash and rain. My fingers trembled as I opened it. If you're reading this, then it's already started. I tried to stop it. I really did. But I was too late. What I summoned was never meant to come here. It doesn't belong in our world. And now it wants to stay. That was the first paragraph. My heart pounded as I read on. Daniel explained how he had become obsessed with contacting Mom, how grief had hollowed him out and filled him with desperation. But what started as seances and spirit boards turned darker. He found a thread on a hidden web forum. The mirror. Pathway. The post promised contact with the dead, for a price. The ritual was simple, but the consequences were not. What Daniel didn't realize, what none of us realized, was that the ritual didn't open a door to the dead. It opened a door to something older, something that wears the faces of the ones we love, an entity known only by a symbol, a twisted, jagged eye drawn in ash and salt. Daniel didn't summon Mom. He let it in. He had been trying to stop it ever since. It speaks like her, smiles like her, even smells like her. But it's not her. It never was. I think I brought it too close. And now it's hiding behind my face. I don't know how long I'll stay in control. If I hurt anyone, I'm sorry. Tears welled in my eyes. My throat tightened. My brother hadn't been lost to death. He had been taken, slowly, piece by piece, until what remained was just a mask. And now, that same thing was happening to me. But why me? The letter's last line answered that. It needs family. Blood opens the door, but only love invites it to stay. And you were always the one who believed in me the most. That was its plan all along. Use our bond, our love, as a weapon. It couldn't survive in this world without being accepted, welcomed, embraced. Daniel had opened the door. I had opened my heart. And now the entity was using that connection to root itself in me. It wasn't about scaring me. It was about becoming me. The dreams intensified after that night. I saw flashes of Daniel's last moments. Only they weren't dreams. They were memories. His memories. I saw him drawing the circle in his room. Saw the mirror begin to bleed. Saw his reflection begin to move on its own. I felt his panic. His horror. And then I saw the moment it stepped through. A flickering shadow with no face, only teeth. He screamed. It laughed. And then silence. I woke up gasping. But something was different. I remembered things I never lived through. Memories that weren't mine. I could smell his cologne. Feel his hands when I looked down at my own. I wasn't just being haunted. I was merging. The entity had tied us together like roots beneath a grave. Daniel wasn't just lost. He was trapped inside me. And the thing wearing him like a skin had been feeding on us both. It wasn't just mimicking the people we loved. It was consuming them. I returned to Daniel's room one last time, not to mourn, but to confront. The mirror he had used for the eye-to-eye ritual was still there, covered by a bedsheet. I pulled it away. The glass was black, not reflective, like a pool of oil. I stared into it, waiting for something to move. And then, it did. A ripple, a flicker. And Daniel appeared. Not the twisted version. Not the smiling figure that haunted me. The real Daniel. Weak. Fading. But real. "I'm sorry," he whispered. I reached out, tears falling freely now. "You're still in there. I can get you out." He shook his head slowly. "You don't understand. It doesn't let go. It doesn't die. It only changes form. It feeds on guilt, on grief, on love. I'm not going to let it win. You already let it in," he whispered. "But you can still shut the door." "How?" He looked behind, himself, fear returning to his face. "It's coming. You have to choose, me or you." "What does that mean?" "You can't save us both." And then he vanished. The mirror cracked. From the inside, I stepped back as a voice echoed around the room. Not Daniel's voice, not mine. Something older, layered in static and distortion. Choose. That was the final truth. The entity wasn't just here to possess. It needed permission, a willing host. But to fully merge with me, I had to accept it. And in doing so, reject Daniel, erase him, let him disappear forever, or reject the entity and destroy the bond completely, risking my own soul in the process. The truth had unfolded. This wasn't a haunting. It was a possession through memory, through emotion. A slow erasure of identity, and the final decision was mine. There comes a point in every nightmare where fear turns into fire. Not warmth, not comfort, but a burning need to fight back, even if it means losing everything. That moment had arrived for me. I had spent weeks trembling in the dark, questioning reality, bargaining with grief, begging for answers. But the time for questions was over. I was done running. That night I prepared the room. Daniel's room, the birthplace of the ritual, the door to the thing that had taken him. If the entity wanted a final choice, it would get one. I lit every candle I could find, arranged them in the same circle Daniel had used. I even found his old notebook, flipped to the page titled "Breaking the Mirror." There was no full guide, no neat instruction, just a warning. To close the door, you must shatter the bond that opened it. Blood opened the gate. Love held it wide. To seal it, you must give up both. I didn't know what that meant. Not really, but I knew this. If I hesitated, it would win. As midnight approached, the room began to shift. The air thickened like syrup. The temperature dropped. The candles flickered without wind. And then the mirror, cracked but unbroken, began to bleed again. Not metaphorically. Real blood. It oozed from the cracks, slow at first, then pouring, flooding down the glass like tears. I stared into it, and there he was. Daniel, or what was left of him, stepped through the mirror. Not flickering, not ghostly, solid, real. Wearing my brother's skin like a costume stitched together with memories. But something was different this time. He didn't smile. He looked tired, older, hollow. "You look like hell," he said. I didn't move, didn't blink, just stood at the edge of the circle. "I'm not afraid of you anymore." "Good," he said, voice layered with something deeper. "Because fear was only the beginning. Now comes the decision." "Let him go," I said. Let Daniel go. The four entity tilted its head. He made his choice. No, I said. You tricked him. You preyed on his grief. He opened the door. It hissed. You held it wide. A gust of wind blew out half the candles. The shadows on the walls stretched and twisted, forming grotesque images. My family screaming, Daniel reaching out with no mouth to speak, my own reflection melting in agony. Still, I didn't move. You want me? I said. Take me, leave him. The entity stepped forward but stopped at the edge of the circle. It couldn't pass. You offer yourself willingly? It asked. I nodded. Only if you let him go. Completely. The room pulsed. The walls shuddered. The floor beneath my feet cracked. You understand what that means? The voice said. You won't be you anymore. I already feel like a stranger in my own skin. Once the merge is complete, there's no undoing. No memory, no self, just me. I took a breath. My eyes stung. But I was ready. I know. A long silence followed. Then the mirror split, not shattered, but opened, like a wound tearing wider. Behind the entity, I saw something. Daniel, chained, eyes wide, screaming, without sound. I couldn't just leave him. At that moment, something in me snapped. Not in fear, but in clarity. The entity needed my love, my guilt, my grief. That's how it latched on. That's how it stayed tethered. So I gave it nothing, closed my eyes, slowed my breathing, thought of Daniel, not as a ghost, not as a victim, but as someone I had loved, lost, and now needed to let go. Fully. Completely. I release you, I whispered. To Daniel. Not to the thing. I release you from my memory, my guilt, my grief. I forgive you for leaving, and I forgive myself for staying. The candles exploded with light. The circle burned crimson. The entity shrieked, not with rage, but with panic. The bond was breaking. My love was no longer something it could feed on. You don't get to choose this, it screamed. I just did. Then I stepped into the circle, and everything went black. I didn't pass out. I descended, fell through layers of my mind. I saw memories unraveling. Birthday parties, fights, inside jokes, nights we cried together. They floated past me like ash, and then I saw him again. Daniel, whole, alive, smiling. Thank you, he said. I reached for him, but he stepped back. This is your life now, not mine. And just like that, he was gone. I woke up in the middle of the room. All the candles were out. The mirror was gone. Just a blank wall remained. No blood, no crack, nothing. Silence. I stood slowly, looked at my hands. My reflection stared back at me in a broken shard of glass on the floor. My eyes looked tired, but they were mine again. The entity was gone. Daniel was free, and so was I. Life moved on, or at least, it pretended to. After that night, I sealed Daniel's room permanently. Told the landlord I didn't need it anymore. I threw away the mirror shards, burned the notebook, and deleted every photo, video, or trace of that time from my phone and laptop. I even stopped saying his name aloud, not out of fear, but finality. Closure. That's what everyone wants after loss, right? Closure. For a while, things felt normal. I started sleeping again. I didn't see shadows out of the corner of my eye. The whispers stopped. My reflection always moved when I moved. It was as if the nightmare had finally run its course and reality had returned. But trauma has layers. And sometimes it doesn't scream. It just lingers, quietly, patiently, like smoke in your lungs you don't realize is still there. One evening, maybe a few weeks later, I found myself cleaning out old boxes in the closet. Most of them were untouched since Daniel died. It wasn't meant to be a ritual or anything, just spring cleaning, life maintenance. That's what I told myself. I pulled out an old photo album, not digital. Real photographs, glossy prints, some even Polaroids. I flipped through the pages, expecting birthday parties, holidays, blurry selfies from our old phones. And they were there. But so was something else. In the background of one of the oldest photos, taken at a Halloween party when we were kids, I saw it. A figure, barely visible, standing in the shadows behind us, not in costume, not smiling, just watching, its face blurred like a glitch, but the silhouette, tall, lean, head slightly tilted, was unmistakable. My blood ran cold. I flipped to another photo, a school play, 3rd grade. There it was again, same spot, same blur, another, a camping trip, again. It was never gone. It was always there, even before Daniel, even before the ritual, even before we knew what we were looking for. I slammed the album shut, heart pounding like a drum. My ears rang. For a second, I swore I could hear my name being whispered from inside the walls. That night, I dreamed again. But this time, it wasn't Daniel. It was me, sitting on the edge of my bed, smiling that same empty smile. Head tilted just slightly, wrong. In the dream, I was watching myself sleep and I whispered, "Thank you for letting me in." I woke up gasping, drenched in sweat. The mirror on my wall was cracked, but I hadn't touched it. That's when I realized the truth, the real truth. I didn't win. The ritual didn't fail. It worked. It just didn't want Daniel anymore. It wanted something better. It wanted me, and I had given it everything it needed. Love, guilt, grief. A willing vessel. The entity never had to force itself in. It waited. It watched. It let me fight, struggle, scream, and conquer. So I would let my guard down. So I would think I was safe. So I would stop resisting. And in that moment of false peace, it took hold. Not violently, not loudly, just quietly, completely. So if you're hearing this, if you're still listening, ask yourself this. When was the last time you looked at your reflection and were absolutely sure it was looking back? Are you sure? Are you really sure? Because I'm not. Not anymore. If you made it this far, you're braver than most. But be honest, will you still sleep with the lights off tonight? If this story left you thinking, questioning, or even just looking over your shoulder, then it did its job. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss the next terrifying tale. Because the next one, it's even darker. See you, if you're still awake.